Hello there, everyone. Welcome to the World of Momos podcast. And on this edition of Reflections and Reactions, we have a returning guest with us. We have the leader of Britain First with us, Paul Golding. And what actually I was going to do, I was going to do a video sort of reflecting on the elections, the current UK elections, what has happened and what is the aftermath. But I thought like it would be better to do it with Paul. So Paul is here now. How are you, Paul?
Very good, very good, very good to be back on the show. I say we did a show before the election, and we did say that when the dust has settled, we'll come back on and give our thoughts on what's happened.
Exactly. And I'm really grateful that you have come back for it. And a lot of the things that we were trying to say, because about reform and everything as well, which is transpiring now, which is coming true, and
Yeah.
will be more and more. So hopefully people will realize and stop all the negative things that they've been saying about what we were reflecting on.
Mm.
How do you make of the elections? Are they what you expected them to be?
I think that was exactly what I expected him to see. I said I made several predictions before the general election. I said that Labour's going to win and get a huge majority in Parliament. That happened. I said the Tories were going to be
Mm,
annihilated. They lost 244 seats. That happened. I said that Reform were going to do very well. They're going to get millions of votes, but only a handful of seats. That happened. Um,
mm,
and yeah, it's pretty much bang on the money with predictions. But it's a very, very interesting election in terms of the results. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, we had a red wave." All of Europe and America. America's about to elect Donald Trump. Europe's
mm,
turning to the right in a big way. Patriot or nationalist movements all across Europe, France, Holland, Belgium, Germany, Bulgaria, Hungary,
mm.
Spain, Italy, all over across Europe. The whole of Europe's moved to the right. People are saying, "Why is Britain moving to the left?" We didn't. It's as simple as that. From what I could see from the election results, there's two things people need to realise. One, we've got the most ridiculous, unrepresentative, and unfair election system that could possibly be devised by mankind.
Mm.
The secondly thing people need to remember is Britain hasn't moved to the left. There hasn't been a red wave. There hasn't been a Labour wave. Labour got exactly the same number of votes as they did 5 years ago, 2019, under Jeremy Corbyn.
Mm,
Exactly the same amount of votes, give or take. What
mm,
happened then? Why have they got Parliament? Well, the Tory vote collapsed. The Tory vote collapsed from just over 13 million all the way down to 6.7 million. And of course, it was split by Reform. Reform got 4 million votes. So a lot of people, the Tories were correct in the election campaign because they said vote Reform, get Labour. but
yeah.
obviously, that's not how democracy is supposed to work. You're supposed to vote with your heart. You're supposed to vote for who you believe in and support,
Yeah.
regardless of what happens. But if you put the Reform vote on top of the Tory vote, Tories would have won. So Reform did open the door for a Labour government, but that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. So we got a grossly unrepresentative election system. So we got anomalies, real bad anomalies. So like Reform got 4.1 million votes, but only 5 seats in Parliament. The Liberal Democrats got 3.5 million votes, but they got over 70 seats in Parliament. How does that work? How do you get more seats? Like, I'm not talking about a few more seats. I'm talking about 70 more seats with fewer votes. That's how unfair the system is. Labour got 34%. No, sorry, 33% of the national vote, Labour, but it got 63% of the votes in Parliament. Labour got 33.4% of the 50% that actually voted, because turnout was only 50%. So if you can extrapolate that, they got something like, I don't know, 17% of all voters voted Labour. So we've got a Labour Party government with a huge, huge majority off of 17% of people who voted, 17% of voters in this country.
Mm,
So you can't, if you sat down and tried, you couldn't make a more unfair system than we have in this country. It's grossly unfair. It's so
mm,
unrepresentative. Like, if we had proportional representation, Reform would be sitting there with 91 seats. Even the Lib Dems would have a few more. Labour would have 33% of the votes because they got 33% of the seats because they got 33% of the votes. The Tories would have got a lot more. So we've got a terrible election system in this country. We're not like Europe. Europe's moving to the right.
Mm,
France, European Parliament, Holland,
mm,
Belgium, Germany, all those countries I named, a lot of them have got proportional representation, but the European Parliament elections are run on proportional representation. So if you vote, say, Britain First, you'll get Britain First if we get above enough, a certain
mm.
percentage. And that's what we need in this country. We need electoral reform. And I'm hoping that Nigel Farage
Yeah,
makes this his
I
number
think so.
one.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Like, we need proportional representation, but also, like, my issue with proportional representation is like, it has to follow with some sort of seeing voting as a mandatory like thing that everyone should vote. We need like a voter turnout to be at least over 80%, because otherwise, like with proportional representation, you only get a activated minority, and a
Yeah,
majority within that minority will like rule everyone. And that's what I fear, because that takes away from the local sort of democracy. Because like in Malden, it doesn't matter what you're voting, um let's say in Norwich or whatever. Like, we are going to elect our Tory candidate, because that's someone that we have known for like 39 years or whatever. you know
mm, mm,
you know what I mean. Like, there's a sort of like a local representation over party representation.
yeah,
But if like the whole of the country is voting, it's mandatory to vote for them, then I think so, like, the proportional representation gives a better picture. But there's also one thing, like, even within the system, it showed like even without proportional representation, there can be things that can be done, because Tories did come second in 98 seats. So
mm,
if they had like better local representation, or like if their local representatives were well known, if they
mm,
weren't just paper candidates, maybe they could have overturned those 98 seats. So it's also, I don't want to this to be like a get out clause for the Reform Party, because they have always neglected like the local sort of how you're
yeah,
supposed to do door to door democracy, like knocking on people's door. I had no Reform Party candidate come to my come to my door. So
mm,
is that as well, like, I don't want to give them this get out clause, like, okay, without proportional representation they couldn't have done better. It would have been better represented, how we're seeing in Europe um happen. Also, like, I'm a bit apprehensive with having the Muslim bloc vote. What would that happen if we have proportional representation? How can they come in? But at the same time, we need it. I think so, we need it, but I think so we need to lay the ground for it first,
mm,
for
mm,
it to happen. But there's also things that we can and we should be doing, especially like if Reform Party was serious about what these elections have shown for me. I said like Reform Party will get 8 seats, so they got 5 seats, so I'm not that far off. I knew, and I was saying Liberal Democrats will get more seats than ever before, or
yeah,
currently doubled it. At least they more than doubled it. Because what I was seeing, like, Ed Davey was running a very non-political campaign, and he was taking this is what I was saying, like, most disenfranchised Tory voters will actually go to Lib Dem than Reform, in
mm,
certain areas, in winnable areas, because they
yeah, yeah,
interchange their voters, like their voters interchange a lot. And that's what happened. But it's sort of what is transpiring now, and I'll ask you about it anyways. But my view of Reform was always like, this is not a party, this is not a political party, this is sort of like an insurgent party that wants to
mm,
get into Tory leadership, and do it that way. That's why they're running it as a business. They're not opening up to their members. And look at what happened now. It's exactly what he said. He did actually a podcast with Jordan Peterson, Nigel Farage, before
mm,
the elections. And in
yeah,
there, he said towards the end, he said that he took inspiration from for Reform Party from the Canadian Reform Party, right?
yeah,
Where the Reform Party candidate got into the Parliament, Canadian Parliament, and then they got into the Conservatives, and then they changed the
yeah,
Conservatives to be more right, but they actually form part of the Conservatives, right? And he said this is
yeah,
exactly what he wants to do. Right, so he's very
yeah,
clear on what he wants to do. So he'll never open up the party. This is the reason why he got rid of, sort of. got rid of Ben Habib, as it seems. He's not the
Yeah,
deputy leader anymore because Ben Habib wanted to build the party, had more local action. That's why there's no even mention of Dr. David Bull anymore, because that's what he
yeah,
wanted to do as well. He was more into policies and stuff. He doesn't care. Nigel
yeah,
Farage doesn't care about policies. All he wants to do is like take over Tories. And then when he took over that movement that is being created, that happened on the 1st of June, he hoodwinked the movement. Like, as far as I can see, he hoodwinked that movement. And then towards the very end, he announced that his major donor is a Muslim. Like, he may or may not have good intentions. I don't know. But how can you have the biggest donor of a political party as a Muslim person, who is now the
mm,
chairman of the party as well? How can we
yeah.
come across and say, okay, how can we deal with Islam then?
Well, first of all, I can't understand why Ben Habib. Ben Habib has been one of the most reliable, most outspoken, most committed senior members of Reform for a long time. And to be honest, he's the only one I actually
Hmm.
have any sliver of uh, respect for in the upper echelons of Reform.
Hmm.
Okay, and it seems like they're freezing him out now. You know, and like I say, they're
Hmm.
freezing Ben Habib out because he's a very outspoken. This is exactly what happened at GB News. You know, you have some outspoken, patriotic
Hmm.
types, and what happens? They all get the sack. They all get sacked, removed. They get purged. Same
Hmm.
thing's happening to Reform now. Anyone who has got a track record of speaking the truth, of speaking with no filter, being honest, yeah, is going to be purged now. And what they've
Hmm.
done is this Muslim businessman's come out of nowhere as a millionaire, and he said, I'll give you a big donation." They've said, "Okay,
Hmm.
come in and be chairman of our party." So loyalty and commitment is not being rewarded, but a Muslim businessman who's been around for a split second, basically they're giving him big senior roles, important senior roles within the party, because they want his money.
They
There's no
made
other
him
reason.
chairman of the party.
You
Yeah.
can't, like, you're supposed to join a political party. You're supposed to work your way up the ranks. You're supposed to show commitment over an extended period of time. You can't just turn up, give a few million, and then expect a senior position. That's corruption. You know, but this is Reform, and
Hmm.
this is what I've been saying, Momus, for a long time. Yes, Reform's great as a kind of icebreaker at the moment. You know, they're shaking things up. They're breaking
Hmm.
and blurring traditional voting lines and so on. They've got 4 million votes. That's great, but don't expect these people to be the long-term solution to the problems we have in this country, because they're not. They won't be. Like, there was no opposition whatsoever to Nigel Farage and his crew walking into Parliament. No opposition. Can you imagine if I was elected to the Parliament? Imagine if I was elected. There'd be
Hmm.
100,000 lefties outside screaming, you know, with hidden guns, and it
Hmm.
would be chaos. There'd be civil war. Um, and the
Hmm.
media would be tearing lumps out of me 24/7. But it seems strange, if these are an insurgent party, if these are a threat to the establishment, if they are like a party for the people, then why isn't that same establishment, you know, attacking them with vigorous persecution and slander and demonisation, like they do to me, or even like they do to Trump in America? They know they can't control Trump. They know they can't trust Trump. So what do? They lawfare, persecution, censorship, the whole lot. Um, so I don't trust them one little bit. They're good for they're good for the moment. So, you know, like all those votes taken away from the Tories, 4 million votes. You know, the vast majority of those would have
Hmm.
gone to the Tories. Um, and that would have probably given us another Tory government. So it's great that they enabled the Tories to get their comeuppance after 14 years of broken promises and bad government. But these people, and I'm talking about Richard Tice, Nigel Farage, I'm talking about the rest of them, yeah, Lee Anderson, they are
Hmm.
not staunch patriots. They're disgruntled Tories, and they would, within a heartbeat,
Yeah.
go back into the Tory party. And I think, you know, all that's
But
holding
that's
them
the
back at the moment.
intention. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, they've been saying it very clearly. Farage has been saying it very clearly for a very long time, or indicating from his actions and,
yeah,
his being part of their conferences and whatever he's been indicating that, and he said it very clearly now that that's what he wants to do, and if that is what he wants to do, then he will. Then it's fine. Okay, it's fine. In my view, okay, we might need a Tory party, a reformed Tory party, right? because it's an old party and stuff. You can't destroy these parties completely. Maybe we need it to come a bit more right, or center right, whatever the case is. But then say it what you want to do, right? In my point of view, we might need Tory party to be reformed. we, it would be good to have Labour completely destroyed and replaced, hopefully with someone like SDP, who's at least patriotic. And then we need a proper party on the right, right? I just hate Tory party calling themselves conservatives. Like, be a party
Mm.
whatever you want to be, right? Be
Yeah.
reformed or whatever, but you're not conservative. And the
Would
person
it be
who's
great,
trying
though?
to go
I
on,
have to
sorry.
say, sorry, I was going to say, wouldn't it be great if the Electoral Commission came out of nowhere and said, "I'm sorry, Conservative Party, you are going to have to change your name because you're not Conservative. It's confusing to voters, and you have to choose
Yeah,
some name, a name that actually represents what you stand for. So why don't you call yourself the Liberal
yeah.
Party?" And then, imagine if that was forced on them, but it should
Liberal
be, because
Democrats, because that's what they are.
they are Liberal Democrats. There's no difference between them anymore. But you're seeing now the. I thought Rishi Sunak resigned. He only resigned as Prime Minister. I thought he resigned as Tory Party leader as well. But he's got a new shadow cabinet, which
Mm,
is just full of these populist, lefty liberal types. So they're
yeah.
determined on behalf of the establishment. And I said this, didn't I, before the election? Rishi Sunak would be happy to lose because he knows he's part of the establishment. They know they've got to pass the torch now to Labour. Otherwise,
Mm,
the whole system becomes imperilled. If you don't pass the torch back between Labour and Tory, the whole system becomes imperilled. So it was just about that
hmm
right time. How many we had? Three. I think we had 3 terms of Labour. Then we had 3 terms of Tories. The
mm,
establishment's not stupid. They know they need to go. The torch of government needs to go back to Labour now. Otherwise, you have a major crisis.
mm,
And I think they realise that. So
yeah.
Rishi Sunak is desperately trying to cling on to the Conservative Party, but the reason he's doing that is because they don't
You
want
know
the
what
Conservative
I think
Party
with
under the weight of
you know what I think with Rishi Sunak is, I think so. His aim now, he knows he's going to lose. I think so. He's just trying to keep Farage out, right? So if he would have left straight away, if he would have resigned as minister as well,
Labour.
then they would have a leadership challenge straight away, right? And if they have a leadership challenge straight away, then Farage has an in, because there's no other person to take over. So I think so. What Rishi Sunak is doing, he's giving time for Tories to build up their leadership. Certain people within the Tory leadership build up their status, right? So when
Yeah,
it comes to it, they can keep Farage out because that's all they want, because they know most of their backbenchers want Farage in.
yeah,
Most of their apparatus at the sitting at the back within the Tory membership, they want
yeah,
Farage in, because there
yeah,
is, to be honest, there is no center right leader. He's at least center right. Whatever he might be, at least
yeah,
he's more Tory than the Tories who are in. But it's just that
yeah,
people need to stop seeing him as reform person or conserve. uh, He is a Tory. So see
yeah,
him as for what he is. And if you see him
yeah,
for what he is, then he's fine, because he's at least better than whatever Tories have to offer.
yeah. Yeah, but as with all Tories, they will let you down when they actually get their hands on power. That's look. You got
Of course.
100 years of track record of Conservatives breaking their promises. So it doesn't matter whether it's Nigel Farage, even Margaret Thatcher. Yeah, she
Mm,
she she curbed the unions. She fought the Falklands War. She fought the IRA, but she still allowed mass immigration to continue, and she still kept us within the EU. So
mm,
Britain was
yeah.
marginally better off under her, but not overall. She's not a messiah that's going to save this country. Neither is Nigel Farage. He is a Tory. He's not going to follow. He's not going to
Yeah.
fight to stop the destruction of his country. He's not going to fight to the death to achieve that. He's not a nationalist. He's a Tory.
Mm,
So yes,
yeah.
we've heard all this before. Even David Cameron was promising to bring down immigration to the tens of thousands. He never. Then Boris Johnson said he would
Mm,
stop the
mm,
votes. Uh, it's just like, how many times do they need to show us that they won't keep their word for us to listen? It's like banging our heads off the brick wall.
mm.
Oh, there's a new Tory now. Yes, he'll do what he says. No, they've never done that in 100 years. So
He
that's the
won.
track record. No, they won't. And
There's
even
a reason why they had net immigration policy, right? There's a reason why they had net immigration policy that they had. It was because he approved it, because that's what he wanted. He didn't want a complete stop of immigration. So even when he
Mm,
comes into, let's say, even with the Tories, that net immigration policy is going to get like polished up in a different way,
Yeah.
and that's what the policy is going to be. It's not going to be an immigration stop. Even SDP is saying like we need an immigration stop, right? Because they're at least they're patriotic, whatever their political side might be. So that's what people need to wake up to. It's like if you want democracy, you need to start voting for people who are actively locally involved, and not for the
Yeah.
big names, not for personalities and stuff, but people who are
Mm.
actually working in your local communities, people who are actually making a difference. Parties like SDP, parties like Britain First, parties like UKIP, vote for people who actually care about you, care about the communities, who are active in the communities, who have presence over there, who knock on your door and who want to talk to you what you want, not just dictate to you.
Yeah. Well, this is like I said. Britain First didn't stand in the general election. We're not going to stand in any parliamentary by-elections coming up, uh, because we want to focus now ruthlessly and mercilessly on local elections for the next 5 years. We've said this before, because we need to start when we fight local council elections. We always can compete with anyone. We've beaten Labour, we've beaten Conservatives, we've beaten the Liberal Democrats, we've beaten the Greens, we've beaten Reform, we've beaten UKIP, we've beaten everyone at local level. We can hold our own at
Hmm.
local council seats. Yeah. When we step up to the parliamentary seats, the only good result we've managed to get, admittedly, is the Tamworth result, and that's a one-off. We came fourth, just behind Reform. We beat the Lib Dems, beat Greens, beat everyone else, which was a good result for a party like Britain First. So we're going to focus on local elections now, and we want to start winning council seats and getting councillors elected, and start building up from the ground upwards. Because I like you said, you made a very good point at the beginning. Reform is not like a real political party. They are a brand. And when the
Hmm.
old European elections and general elections, you got that brand that's on TV and you vote for it. But look, it's non-existent when it comes to regional, local, county, town, cities. There's nothing. It's a database and a brand, and they stand in the big elections and get lots of votes, but there's nothing there. So you take Nigel Farage out of the equation, and would not. Reform would very quickly sink. And they're hastening their own demise, in my opinion, with this, especially this thing today
Hmm.
with Ben Habib. I actually feel sorry for Ben Habib because we stood against him in Wellingborough, and he got like 4,000 votes,
Hmm.
and he was the one who crushed us in Wellingborough. We got a paltry vote because everyone voted for Reform.
Hmm.
Um, but he's the only one who really is.
Everyone voted for him, I think so. Not just Reform, everyone voted for him as well, because
Mm,
when he speaks, he's a very genuine person. He seems like he really does care, and he really does understand, and he
yeah,
wants to do something good, that he wants to back policies, he wants to do the right kind of politics. Like, it comes across like that, and
yeah.
people vote for him. But they shafted him for this, it's the same reason, because they don't want to pay attention at local democracy. They don't care about local democracy.
But
They just
this
want to
new
get into
Muslim chairman,
Tories and let Tories do it.
yeah, this new Muslim chairman, who is he? What's his track record? How long's he been around? How many seats has he stood in? How many elections has he stood in? He's
Hmm.
literally just bought his way into the senior ranks of Reform. Like, he literally has just paid to
Yeah.
get to the top of that party, and that's corrupt.
Yeah.
I don't care how you can spin that. That is
Mm-hmm.
corrupt. Like, fair enough, you want to make Richard Tice
Mm-hmm.
the deputy leader because Richard Tice in Parliament is going to be far more prominent. Yeah, so you've got Richard Tice deputy leader.
Mm.
The chairmanship of that party should have gone to Ben Habib, but they've tossed him out
Mm.
in a gross act of
Yeah.
disloyalty and put
Mm-hmm.
this nobody who just happened to have
Yeah.
donated a lot of money. That is corrupt and
Yeah.
scandalous, in my opinion. I would never
Yeah.
dream of doing that.
I mean, it doesn't matter if he's a Muslim or not. Like, that comes as a second sort of alarm, right?
Mm, yeah,
But anyone coming in and doing that, but the thing is, they have form for that, right? Why was Richard Tice the leader for so long? Because he was putting his own money in. So they are running it as a business. It's not a political party where you actually get members, and members vote for the leader that they want, members vote for the policies that they want, or can vote out the policies that they want. Like, it's not that. They're just running it as a business, so they need to be honest about it. It's not a political party. Is a a group of insurgency into the Tory party, and it's a
Yeah,
business created to actually tackle that. Okay, fine, like, you want to do it, all the power to you, but just be honest about it, because
yeah.
that's what he's done. And you know what I'm seeing these right now, currently, right now, there are a lot of people who are not listening to people like us who are warning them about Reform Party, right? And now they are too ashamed to admit that they've been hoodwinked, right? So they're coming up with things like, oh, you just need to wait and see what happens, or
Mature.
oh,
Yeah,
it's not Islam, it's radical Islamization that is a problem. It's like, well, you can't get one without the other. They're coming up with all these excuses so that they
yeah.
don't have to admit that they were hoodwinked.
You're right. It's a mixture of desperation, like they're desperate for something to save this country. So that's desperation. That's normal, but it's also the fact that humans will burn the whole world down before they admit that they're wrong. It's human nature. We are stubborn
Hmm.
and quite often arrogant creatures, and yeah, it's going to become a lot more obvious over the next 6 months to a year just to what extent that millions of people who've said, yeah, I've seen massively unrealistic, optimistic expectations of reform. I see it on TikTok, everywhere else. It's like, oh, reform's going to win power and they're going to deport all the, there's going to be mass deportations and they're going to ban woke and all this stuff. They're going to stop the boats. And I'm thinking, really? None of that's going to happen. End of. Nigel Farage is not going to implement mass deportations. He's not. He's a Tory. He's not going to happen. He's not. He wouldn't even. He'd probably try and stop the boats, but the problem is he's not. He's not strong enough in his personality to really take on the establishment, the Home Office, the deep state. Take it all on head first, and just say "f you," and I'm going to force this through. He's not got that type of backbone, that type of metal. You know. So people are wildly optimistic about reform in terms of this is the saviour we've been waiting for. This is what we've been waiting for. They're going to save the country.
Hmm.
No, they're not. It is a
Yeah.
uh,
And
it is Nigel Farage's way of forcing his way into the Tories. And like I say, you've been saying it. I've been saying it. I've
yeah,
been saying
I
six
mean,
months.
that's all.
They've been having a go
Yeah.
at us, saying you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong.
And I think so, like, people, the thing is, like, people also need to understand, like, okay, maybe I hope that I'm wrong, right? But I know I'm not wrong at the
Mm.
same time. But I hope I'm wrong and he changes his mind. But he won't, because it's not the first time he's doing it. But at the same time, I think people need to understand why the local democracy part is important for a party to do, right? Why it is important for local action to happen is because when you have in local constituencies, when you have your own councillors, your councillors are feeding into the party apparatus of what the local problems are, right? So you are connected with the local problems. You have a network of people who are voted in, or who are trying to vote in, or who know what goes on within the councils, local councils, what changes are needed, what needs are there, how to make those changes happen, what are the rules and regulations within the local authorities, and how things can happen, how you can communicate with civil service. This is why it's important, because you build that network as a party, right? But if you're just going for the top MPs, they're not going to change anything, because if they think that they're going to just rock up, imagine, like, even if, let's say, Farage becomes a Tory leader, and next election they win the elections and Tories become the, like, leading party, whatever. You can't just
Mm.
rock in and say to civil service, okay, I want the boat stopped, just stop the boats. They're going to turn around and ask you, like, how do you want us to do it?
Well,
If you
they say
don't
no.
have a written down proper policy, it won't happen. Like, you can't just say it, like, it won't happen, right? Even if it even if it wants to happen, you can't just tell civil service or local government, just do it. You need to build relationships with them, how, because we make them as the enemy all the time. Like, yeah, there is problems within civil service and local government, but at the same time, they are built up of people which are from us, from our communities, from our, they're part of the country. It's not all of them that is a problem. We just need ways of how to communicate with them. This is where labor wins, because labor knows how to get them on board. They just give them money,
Mm.
and
And
we have to pay for that money afterwards.
the Lib Dems are the same. They built their party from the ground up. They was focusing on pavements and lampposts and local issues like
Hmm.
that. Local parking, local disabled bays. That's where they really cut their teeth, and it works.
Hmm.
That's why we've got the Liberal Democrats today. But yeah, from a Britain First point of view, we understand we need to be taken, and Britain First is getting a lot of interest from like overseas nationalist parties, overseas patriotic parties. But
Hmm.
they still want to keep it on the low, keep it kind of like behind the scenes cooperation at the moment, because we do need to start winning council seats. We need to start winning seats, getting people elected,
Hmm.
and that will transform everything, in our opinion. So we're going to be focusing on that relentlessly and mercilessly for the next, 5 years before we even entertain going up the political ladder. But yeah, like I say, the elections were they were quite strange. But when you unpacked it all, it's a very good election. Like I say, 4 million people voted outside the box. 50% of people still stayed at home. Now, that's very significant, because, how much was at
Hmm.
stake? How much was at stake in that election? But 50% of people still said, no, balls, I don't like any of it. I'm staying at home. So the silent majority is still very silent. But we've got, Labour didn't, if you actually unpack it statistically, they didn't do as well as they should have done. 14 years of hated Tory government,
Hmm.
and they got the same vote they did 5 years ago. So they didn't do as well as they're claiming. They don't deserve a parliamentary majority. They only got 33% of the votes, and 50% of people stayed at home. So you're looking at like 17%. It's pathetic. We got a government
Yeah.
with a huge parliamentary majority, and we got 17% of voters. It's a scandalous situation we find ourselves in, but it
but
just
but
goes to show.
the positive thing out of that is that there's still people out there who is hungry for something, right? They're still waiting. They haven't
Mm,
fallen for reform, as reform is trying to tell us, because otherwise they would
yeah,
have all gone out and voted reform, right? We would have had huge reform seats then. But they
mm,
haven't, because they haven't bought into the reform mania still, which means there is an opportunity. There's an opportunities for parties like Britain First and other parties to grab the attention of the audience and grab the attention of the public and show them like why they should vote for them. And that's local action, like, parties like Britain First. I know you're into it. Nick Tanconi with UKIP, he's doing that as well, like, because he wants to, like, galvanize from the local levels. SDP do that as well, so people need to turn to the parties who actually care for them at local level. But that's how the
mm.
the Muslim independent votes got in as well, because that's what they are doing. They're working on the
Exactly.
local levels.
Exactly. And George Galloway has said, he lost his seat, but he said now that the Workers' Party is going to focus on getting all the councillors elected across Rochdale and other areas, and I think he will do very well. I think he'll do very, very well. But yeah, I mean, so you got a huge, you can see the old voting patterns of voting Tory and Labour is starting to break down. 50% of people still
Hmm.
stayed at home. It's one of the lowest turnouts in a general election for a long time.
Yeah.
At least
Hmm.
half of the electorate don't like any of the options, don't like any of them, disgusted. I like your idea, and that's our party policy, to have voting to be mandatory. It must be. So many people have
Hmm.
died for your right to vote, and you just don't bother.
Yeah.
It's not right. They do it in Australia, and they get 80% turnouts in their elections. So we need mandatory voting. All elections, like a general election, generally the first Thursday of every May of every year should be a bank holiday. So if there is an election on, you should be out there.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
shouldn't have to go to work. It should be a bank holiday. So we can do all these things. We can do all these reforms that will
Yeah.
really bolster our democracy. Because at the moment we've got a government with a huge parliamentary majority that's got 17% of the national vote. It's pathetic. It's so grossly unfair. We've got reform that got 14% of the national vote and got 0.8% of the seats in parliament. How does that work? And then you've got the
Hmm.
Liberal Democrats got 700,000 less votes than Reform, and they got 70 more seats. How does this work? It's ridiculous. Like the whole system was created in the 1700s, for heaven's sake, where the aristocracy wanted to keep a strong grip on society. That's why we've got the House of Lords, because the
Which
House of
they're
Lords
still
can
doing it.
veto. Yeah, the House of Lords all the aristocrats could veto anything that came from the House of Commons, and so we've got the electoral system we've got at the moment it was all right in the 1700s, but these days it's actually an instrument of tyranny in this country, and we need more things like the EU referendum. Why can't we have a referendum on mass immigration? Why can't we have a referendum on stopping the boats? Why can't we have a referendum on all sorts of issues? Because they don't want that.
Yeah.
Because we're not a democracy. We're a
Yeah.
oligarchy. You have the people, then you have a class, a layer of oligarchs, which is essentially what these politicians are. The journalists and the politicians at the top, they impose their
Yeah.
values on us. They impose their policies on us. So yeah,
I
the
mean, they
whole
already
country.
asked us, right? They already asked us, and they're still crying about it. They already asked us about EU, and we voted against it, and they're still crying about it. Why would they want to do more of that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, we're all. The next 4 years, though. So the thing is, right? I keep saying to people, we need things to get a lot worse before things can get better. Yeah, because like that 50% that's sitting at home, the 50% of voters that
Yeah.
are sitting at home because they're so disgusted with the system. There's no other way to put it. So we need things to get. I'm called an accelerationist by a lot of people because I don't want people to keep adjusting to a gradual managed decline. I don't want things to just get
Yeah.
worse slowly.
Yeah.
And people get used to it and they move and they just get adjusted to it and become desensitized. Right? What I want is for things to get really bad really quickly, so it forces people off their backsides and in their millions to vote for radical alternatives. Yeah. So enter the Labour Party. Now, the Labour Party campaigned for that entire election saying vote for change, vote for change. But when you think about it, they weren't actually offering change. What they were offering is more of the same, but on steroids. Yeah, we'll take what the
Yeah.
Tories were doing and we'll do it much greater. We'll do it at a much greater
Faster.
pace and a far. Yeah, they're voting for the acceleration of bad policies. That's what people vote. And there's an interesting poll before the election that we should talk about. That it was a poll or a survey of people who intended to vote Labour, and over 50% of the people who were surveyed said they were going to vote Labour only to get the Tories out. If you think they got 33.4% of the 50% that bothered voting, and 50% of them said they're only voting for Labour to get the Tories out. So you're talking about, if you extrapolate it to the whole electorate, they got like 17% of the vote, cut that in half for the people who are just voting to get the Tories out. Labour only really were endorsed by something like, I don't know, 8, 9, 10% of the total electorate, and yet they've got this huge majority in Parliament. Only 5% of the people surveyed said they were voting Labour because they agreed with their policies. That is unbelievable, isn't it? It really is. Baffling. Only 5% of all those people who voted Labour voted for them because they like their policies. Over 50%
And
they just want to get rid of them.
I wonder what they're going to think then when Reform tries to get into Tories, right? Because a lot of them voted Reform as well because they wanted to kick Tories out as well, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this is the state that we are in. But I think so. There's a huge opportunity, but it also annoys me that those 50% of people, like such a huge majority of the people, didn't turn out to vote. It just annoys me because it's sort of like, okay, you might not feel any hope. You want to vote for Britain First, vote for SDP, vote for UKIP, whatever. Like, give the smaller parties hope that you actually believe in their policies, because every single vote, whether parties like yours win or not, every single vote is an affirmation that we believe in what you're doing, so keep on doing it. So even if you come third in a constituency, at least, like, you have an idea, okay, this many people are for me, and these many people I want to convert now. More of them I need to convert to get the seat. It gives that hope to people, so I just don't like people just sitting at home and not voting, even if your constituency is going to be 99% labor. At least show that one person is not.
Mm. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think voting should be mandatory, and I think that if you don't vote, you should get a very stiff fine. Um, because we need, the one problem we have in this country is the a minority of people actually vote. If that silent majority got out and was forced to vote, like I say, I think at this election, Reform would have
Hmm.
probably got 200 seats in Parliament. If we would have had change, we'd have real change, but they don't. They stay at home.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that one day we'll implement mandatory voting, just like they have in Australia, and proportional representation. Because if you go out and think, obviously
Yeah.
Britain First or anyone else, they're not going to win the election, but I want them to have seats in Parliament, yeah, and it's
Hmm.
proportional representation. So I'll go out and vote for them, and
Yeah.
they might get one seat, but it's worth me voting for them. But you can
Hmm.
only get to that position with mandatory voting and proportional representation and regular referendums on big issues. If you do all those things, then you'll save our democracy. Because at the moment, we've not got it's not even in the same universe as the word democracy, what we have in
Hmm.
this country.
Otherwise there's no point as well of democracy, right? Like screw it then, like just let's have the king back and let them rule it, because at least we'll know what the transaction is then. At least what if we know where we stand then, like, there's no fooling us.
Yeah, no, we need root and branch reform of this country, but we're not going to get it anytime soon because the two main parties, they benefit too much from the entrenched first past the post system. Like
Hmm.
Labour, they got 33% of the vote and they got 63% of the seats in Parliament. Why would they change that system, even though it's in their manifesto to support PR?
Hmm.
They won't do it.
Yeah, they won't. No, they won't. So we're going to wrap up now, because I know you're busy. So thank you for giving us your time. So the wrapping up
Mm,
of the elections is that it was both good and bad at the same
mm.
time. It's bad that Labour got in, but it's good because they got in, and people are going to wake up. At the same time,
Yes.
it's bad
Mm.
that Reform didn't get more seats, but it's good at the same time because they won't have done anything with it. So, and
Yeah.
same with the Tories, is bad that they got less seats, but it's good because they needed to be punished, right? So we have
Yeah.
to we have to see it from both angles. So, but
Mm,
hopefully this gives an opportunity for the parties, for the right parties, to do the local election, and for people to actually start noticing the parties that actually care for them, rather than just going for the blue and red dynamics like we have in America. We don't want the Republicans and Democrats sort of a thing. We want actual
yeah.
people to vote for different parties and have different parties represented in parliament, so we have
Mm,
more of a proportional voice within the parliament.
mm.
Anyways, thank you so much for coming, and I hope we can talk again some other time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm at your disposal anytime.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you
You're welcome.
everyone for watching. Take
Yeah.
care.
Bye.